Hi, Tom. We were discussing earlier about how inaccuracy in news reporting to the majority of Americans is creating a fascist brainwashing of the majority of our country. And it's because Ronald Reagan abolished the Fairness Doctrine, and that was 35 years ago. Now that Congress is in control and we have a president that would not veto something like that, isn't that something that should be done?
Yes and no. The Fairness Doctrine did not require a radio station, if it carried Rush Limbaugh, to also carry me. The Fairness Doctrine did two things. Number one, it said that you have to program your station in the public interest. And that definition was very, very vague. But it was broadly interpreted to mean that you must have news at the top of every hour on radio, and you must have at least a half hour of news during prime time on television. And that whenever the management and ownership, and then there was this thing called the Equal Time Rule, which went along with the Fairness Doctrine. They were both canceled by Reagan. And the Equal Time Rule said that if the management or ownership of a radio or television station publishes an online editorial, and the way it used to work back in the 60s, and I worked in the industry in the 60s. I worked in television and I worked in radio for 7 years. And it was normal back then for the owner of the radio station or the owner of the TV station or at least the general manager to go on air for 2 or 3 minutes and say, we think that this bond issue to provide a new zoo for the idea, or a bad idea, whatever it may be, that when the ownership or management made a statement on the air, that you had to provide an opposing view an equal amount of time. It was my job when I worked at WGIM-TV in Lansing to find, or part of my job, to find that local person who was going to say, yes, I disagree with the owner of the station. And more often it was Tom Jones, who was the manager of the station at that time. This was like in 1967. And so, that does not have anything to do with the programming. That just has to do with editorials. And by and large, radio and TV stations don't run editorials anymore anyway. So I'm not sure that the Fairness Doctrine is any kind of a magic bullet. The more consequential thing was in 1996 when the Telecommunications Act came out, the Telecommunications Act of 96, and Bill Clinton signed this. And prior to that, there were ownership rules, which said that a single company or a single family could not own more than a certain number of radio and television stations, and which is why Clear Channel at the time was the largest group of radio stations in the country. They were down in the Southeast, and I think they had something like 80 stations, 70 or 80 stations, but that was like as big as you could get. And you couldn't own both a radio station and a TV station and a newspaper in the same market. There were a few exceptions, but generally speaking, you couldn't do that. And so basically, when Clinton signed that law, what happened was within a year, Clear Channel went from owning 100 stations to owning 1,000 stations. And right-wing radio started popping up all over the place because talk radio, Limbaugh had created this fad, this thing, right-wing talk radio, and it went everywhere. And so really, I think that the solution isn't to have government essentially censorship of the airwaves or government mandated equality of political opinion, because that's always a danger. What happens when the government is run by Donald Trump? He's going to decide, what's a left-wing position and what's a right-wing position, really. But I think a better alternative is to restore competition to media, and that means break up the giant media behemoths. That's my opinion, Valerie.
I see, yes.
So rather than working... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think organizations like Fox News and Newsmax should not be able to say that they are a news organization, because they're not.
That's another thing, but again, you're getting into definitions, and when the government starts controlling definitions, then you're treading into very dangerous territory. You have to tread very carefully.
Right. Well, I agree with you. Competition would help solve a lot of this.
I really think so. I mean, all of the stations that carry my program, all of the commercial AM radio stations that carry my program, to the best of my knowledge, we might still have one Clear Channel station. We used to have one. But I believe all the rest of them are now independently owned, and that's a good thing, and we want more of that. Valerie, I got to move along, but thank you for the call.